On today's episode of The Yips, we have on Coach Bono. He has coached with 12 different NFL or college football teams and numerous Hall of Fame players. We peel back the curtain and learn all about it. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to the Yips podcast. I'm your host Caleb, co-host Chase, as always. And today we have on John Bonamego. Did I say that right?
Yes, you
Bonamego?
did. Yep,
Okay.
very good.
I'm notorious for messing up last names, so I'm glad I got that one. John here has been a previous special teams coordinator, head football coach. We're going to dive into some of these experiences, so we're really excited to have you on, John. So, John, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything that you'd like to add to your title that I listed?
Uh, no, I go by Bono.
Bono. Okay.
All my former players and most of the people in that I run with in my circles all know me as Bono. Not the U2. I like to refer to myself as the Me Too Bono, but it's all good. And it's a pleasure to meet you guys, and thanks for having me on the show today. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you too. Before we dive in, Chase, let us know how are you doing? What's going on in the Richter household?
Well, nothing much going on. We're finally not sick. I don't know if you went through this, John, but we went through about a month-long back-to-back hit of sicknesses left and right this winter. So happy to be out of that. And my work's pool tournament has officially started. So get ready to hear some updates on that over the coming weeks. I am 0 for 1 right now, but it's double elimination, and I was seated in a poor position, so I'm okay with that.
Well, I know we have a lot of questions that we wanted to dive into, but I thought I'd give Chase the opportunity to ask the first question. Usually I'm the one hogging it. So Chase, take it away.
Well, I had a question that was pertinent to what happened last night. And if anyone's watching this episode, you will see that Caleb is unashamedly wearing Ohio State everything. He's got 2 Ohio State helmets in the background. He's got an Ohio State hat on and an Ohio State shirt on. Obviously, he is a Michigan fan, and we understand.
Yeah, right.
But John, as a special teams coach yourself, Caleb and I were watching the game last night, and we text each other both almost simultaneously when Notre Dame came out to do a fake punt on a 4th down to try to get the first down. In your experience, is there a way to disguise that you're about to go for it on 4th and 1 other than putting in your backup quarterback onto the field?
Well, I mean, obviously they were hoping that Ohio State wouldn't notice that, but honestly, that's the hardest thing about executing a fake in any phase, whether it's punt, field goal, or any type of gadget play, kickoff return, punt return, is really getting it called. As a coordinator, that's the toughest thing because generally, and as it should be, the head coach should really have the final say so on whether or not you're going to do that. And if you try to go run rogue, you're probably going to find yourself out of a job very quickly. Yeah, I mean, they were hoping that they wouldn't notice it. And look, the speed of the game and what we see on TV is much different than the experience that you have on the sideline as a coach. My guess is probably it was successful in that regard. Ohio State was prepared, but whether they actually, if you see something on the sideline as a coach, it's too late by then. The training's been done.
Yeah.
You would hope that your players know the personnel of the opponent personnel, the units that they're playing on, and so if they saw, if you saw a substitution, that would be an alert. That said, both sides of the ball, they were sound in their execution of running the fake, except for they didn't make the catch.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like Ohio State was out of position. They had it essentially became a one-on-one route, and now you're just really dependent on the throw and the player making the play. The throw was there, wasn't quite as good, probably catchable, should have been caught, but it wasn't.
That's interesting. How much, I guess, time do you get to spend on running these plays and executing them in practice? Because I'm sure the majority of the time is going to be on offense and defense. right?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to vary, from staff to staff, but typically, you're not getting a tremendous deal, a lot, huge blocks of meeting time uh, or practice time on special teams, and that's why it's imperative that whoever's working with your special teams they've got to be, exceptionally organized. You have to be able to manage a lot of people, that not just players but coaches, and you really want to maximize your time and be as efficient as you possibly can. So when it comes to fakes, there's really two types. There's some probably basic fakes that you carry all season, you know, and you're just waiting for the right time to bring it out. That particular fake was not going to be a tip. That's not one that's going to take an enormous amount of preparation. I mean, there's not a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
Uh, your punt protection rules you know, are going to have blocking assignments. So you're really taking one blocker out of the protection if you're going to snap it to one of the upbacks or the personal protector and use him as a thrower or a runner. So there'd be a little bit of an adjustment on that side of it, but for the most part, you could use your basic blocking rules for your punt team,
Hmm.
and it's just a matter of instead of releasing to go cover the punt, you're running a 5 yard out route. Let's snap it directly to the up back and see if we can throw it out there. That's not a type of fake that is going to really require a tremendous amount of prep time.
Hmm.
Uh, Nor would what they did the week before. Everybody made a big deal about the mass substitution. That's just a coordinated thing. It worked in that they were able to get Georgia to jump off sides. It was just a hard count. It looked cool the way they did it. They did a great job of executing it, but a lot of times, and I think this is really the genius in what they did do. There's a lot of genius in simplicity.
Hmm.
Uh, if you can make it simple for me, if it's easy for my guys to execute, hard, give you another thing that you have to defend. Uh, that's a tilt in your favor.
Yeah, that's that's a not a job that I would want, if I'm being honest. So kudos to you for following that. I assume it was a dream of yours. Just for some reference for the people listening, I wanted to go through some of your, actually, all of the teams that you've worked for, and then I'll have a follow up question after that, and it might be
Okay.
a little revealing here. So, University of Maine, wide receiver coach, special teams coordinator. Lehigh University running backs coach. Then we had some time at the United States Military Academy at West Point,
Mhm.
and then this is where it gets really exciting. Jacksonville Jaguars, Green Bay Packers, New Orleans Saints, Miami Dolphins, Detroit Lions, Central Michigan University, University of Michigan, and then the LA Rams and Iowa State University. So tons of experiences here. Now the question I'm going to ask that's really going to show some colors here. Outside of pay or how well you did at any of those, is there any team that I just listed or university that stands above the best and it just has a soft spot in your heart that and you just admire your time there?
That's an easy question to answer, and hands down, that would be the United States Military Academy, West Point. Just by
Good
virtue
answer.
of the fact that the type of individuals that you would have the privilege of working with, those relationships are, and look, at the heart of it, coaching is a relationship business. If you're a coach and you don't care about kids, you don't care about players, then I would ask you, why are you doing it? First and foremost, it's always about the players. But when you have the opportunity to work with that caliber of individual, uh, and just looking back on it, I mean, it was such a great laboratory for me at that stage in my career. I worked for a great head coach in Bob Sutton, who really gave me a tremendous amount of autonomy over the special teams, probably in hindsight, probably more than probably more than I deserved at that time. But hands down, that was an incredible experience. And I've often said, if I could take my family and not have to change anything with them, if I could go back to one point in time in my life, it'd probably be those times I spent at West Point.
That's cool. That's really cool. So
On
I
the banks
mentioned,
on the banks of the Hudson River.
yeah, I'm sure that didn't hurt. That didn't hurt anything. Yep. So with all your experience coaching, now most of your coaching experience is in special teams, but there was a stop that you made where you were the head coach of Central Michigan, correct?
Correct.
For all the dummies out there, most of them probably listen to our podcast because we're dummies as well. And we all just, form a group of foolish people. So for those of us that don't know, that maybe see from the outside and have ideas, what's the difference between being a coach in a special teams role versus a head coach? Obviously, there's a role change, but what's
Sure.
the difference you noticed jumping
Well,
into that role?
other than the obvious ones, but here's what I would say, and I don't want to not answer your question, but I'd like to kind of reframe your question.
Please
And
do.
the way I would say this is, I'd say there are a tremendous amount of parallels between the duty of a special teams coordinator and the head football coach, particularly in the National Football League. Uh, One of the things I always loved about special teams is you're working with the entire roster. Outside of the head coach, I was the only coach on the staff that spoke to the entire team every single day. So they were all in my meeting every single day. And then when you take into part of the evaluation, you're evaluating players, you're looking at them whether it really doesn't matter whether they play offense or defense. You're looking at what skill sets they have and how you can apply them in the kicking game. What jobs, what responsibilities can you assign to them? There's a tremendous amount of player development that takes place on special teams. And, when you're in the National Football League, no one is drafted to play special teams except for the specialists, right? And it's an all-star league. So the reason those guys are there is because they're the very best at their position. They were the best receiver. They were the best running back. They were the best linebacker. And now they get in a situation and you're going to have to train these guys to go out and do something that they've never done, or they probably haven't ever done before. And in the National Football League, you have to use offensive players on coverage teams because there just aren't enough bodies on the sideline on game day. So, the motivation, the training, players respect organization. They respect discipline. They respect somebody that's trying to get them better. And, all of those skills. And I was to say, look, if we can't trust you to play on special teams, how can we trust you to play on offense and defense? So a lot of players have to kind of earn their stripes, but you're building their confidence. You're going to ask them to do something that they've never done in their career, or maybe again, a very long time. I'm sorry if I'm being redundant, and now they got to go out and do this and on the biggest stage that there is in our game, where the stakes are the highest, the lights are the brightest. And, so how you train them, how you practice, training them in the fundamentals and the techniques, that's what they gain their confidence from. And when they go out and they're able to have success, but you also have to be straight with guys, right? You have to set a high standard. And then again, going back to your original question, all of those things, the fundamental development, but the organization, the evaluating of the players. I was in a fortunate position I've been on some great staffs with some great head coaches. So I've had the opportunity to watch a lot of really good coaches work, right? So I've had opportunity to evaluate coaches whether it's in their individual periods or in their game planning and that sort of thing. So I think that gives you a little bit of an edge. The other areas like all of the situational things that happen or can happen throughout a game, right? All the clock management, all the special situations. We had a really unique one happen a few weeks back with with the Chargers. We saw a fair catch kick that hadn't happened
Oh
in
yeah.
50 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to, like, you don't just, hey, you can't, you're not waiting to game day when the thing comes up to explain it to the guys what's happening, right? Those situations have to be rehearsed. You have to have an installation schedule that allows you to do that. Um, so I just think that there was a lot of parallels, from a special teams NFL special teams coordinator to the duties of a head coach.
So I've always been curious how you guys determine who's going to be like the returners, because I feel like every wide receiver on the team could probably return a ball
Yeah,
just
they
as
they
good as the
can,
next
but
one.
the most important thing is catching the ball, right?
That's true.
So no matter what happens on a punt return, I would always tell our teams there's only two acceptable outcomes. Probably, hopefully, a couple times this year, we're going to go bang our head on the goalpost, and we're going to be able to trot the extra point team out there to kick the point after touchdown. Every other time, it's got to be our quarterback under center taking the snap. So the next, it's going to be one or two things. We're either going on back on offense or we're kicking an extra point. Any other thing is unacceptable. So when you ask about evaluating, that's the first and most important thing, right? We have to have confidence in whoever we put back there that they're going to make good decisions, fielding the ball, and and play with good technique, and then what they can do afterwards. That's a bonus, but it starts with catching the ball. You saw one just the other day in one of the games. We didn't get a ball fielded in a playoff game, and it hits and rolls. When a ball's not fielded, you lose. So the general rule of thumb is that's an unfielded punt's usually about an average of at least 15 yards in lost field position. So
Hmm.
first and foremost, you got to go catch the football.
Interesting. So at practice, do you guys have like these kickoffs that are just let's see
Yeah,
who
yeah.
can catch the most
Well,
balls?
yeah, typically, your first part of practice at just about every level, you're going to have what we call a specialist period, right? So you have your specialists out there warming up, the snappers and the kickers, punters, and you have a group of the return group, the guys that are auditioning for those roles, or who are already on the depth chart in those roles. They're out there catching balls, and then you're working with them on the fun. You'll have someone watching the punter, someone watching the snapper, and then somebody back there, always somebody back there working with the returners, whether it's punt or kick. And they're being evaluated and coached on their technique and how they should move to the ball, and where they need to position themselves, the position of their hands, and all of those things on a daily basis. So it's a constant. You you really, if you're going to be good at anything, you got to commit yourself to ongoing skill and technique development. And
Mm-hmm.
along with that, there's always constant evaluation. And you have to live under the premise that players are, if they're being coached and they're accepting the coaching, that they're always going to get better. They're getting better every day. So you never want to, I think the worst thing you can do for a player is to pigeonhole them or be an instant, what Coach Parcells used to call an instant evaluator. You have to recognize that especially at the college level or the high school level, that these kids are growing and changing. And you want them. Bo Schembechler said you're either getting better or worse every day. So get better.
So how do you feel? I mean, knowing your philosophy there, how do you feel about some of those punt returns that we see where the return takes a big risk in catching the ball and try to field it without fair catching it? Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it goes very negative. Do you
Yeah,
have an opinion on that? Do you coach them on that, or is that
of course.
in the
Yeah,
moment
yeah,
they
of
make
course.
a decision?
Again, that's where trust is, right? Trust is earned. So and I think you always want to make this. You want to make what I call EBDs, right? Evidence based decisions. If you're coming in my office and you're asking for more playing time, right? my response is going to be, okay, if you want more playing time, let's look at what you've done with your opportunities thus far, right? You have to give me reason to put you on the field. And so, you know, that position, particular the punt returners, we
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to trust you. That's a very difficult job. People don't recognize how difficult it is to catch a punt uh, in a major college or NFL football game. It's not an easy thing.
No, absolutely.
Stand back there sometime. You know,
Well,
it's
especially with
like
how the ball moves, right?
the
It's
way
not
it
just,
moves,
it doesn't
and
go straight up and straight down. It's
yeah,
not any of
and like
that.
in the NFL, these guys are hanging the ball up there 5 seconds,
Yeah.
and you have and you're focused on the ball, but you hear a stampede of
Running right at your
you know
face. Yeah.
coming at you, and they're coming there with an intent, and it's not to help you or say hello to you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're coming down there. They have malintent.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially when you got a bunch of them that get
Yep,
right up on you. You know what I
yep,
mean? And they're
yep,
right. I mean, it's so easy to, if you take your focus off, I feel like even for a second,
sure.
you see the receivers when they go to catch a ball and they're thinking about running before
Mhm.
they even caught the ball. Same thing with the return. If you're thinking about them right in your face, it's really easy to lose focus and drop that ball. So
Sure.
I can absolutely see that.
I want to get your take on a very controversial thing that Travis Kelce does all the time.
Hmm.
And Andy Reid seems to shade him for it every single time he does it. And it's the pitch back. Usually he like catches it on a slant route, he pitches it back to somebody else that books it
Sure.
for another 15 whatever many yards. Now, there are some dire circumstances that you need to, you're losing, time's expiring on a kickoff. You're just trying your best to see whatever you can come up with. It has probably like a less than 1% success rate, I would say. But what are your thoughts on pitching the ball, either in a special teams or just on
Well,
a regular play?
it's not happening on special teams.
Okay.
So if that answers your question, I mean, no, it's not unless it's unless it's what we our desperation
Yeah.
kickoff return where it's
Doesn't matter. Just go.
we
Yeah. Do
call
anything you
that
can.
SB, which is obviously the award SB, but it's
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
also it's
An
also an
acronym.
acronym, so but yeah, in that situation it's touchdown or turnover, but that's really the only situation unless it's a called type of I'll go back to the one of the first questions about fakes. Those go through the head coach, right? It has to be that way. um, that's the only situation if I'm coaching you where that's going to be acceptable.
We were talking right before we started recording about Josh Allen, right? And
Hmm.
how you had coached against him.
Right.
And I saw him just the other day. It was like, what was it, third, fourth and one, on like right on the goal line. He gets
Yep.
stopped up and he turns around. He had his back, and you could see he was like trying to get the ball to a place, but then he got wrapped up and ended up holding on to it and stuff. You could see that it's starting to make its way. It seems
Sure.
like through the league as a thought process, as a
Yeah.
different opportunity outside of special teams. How do you feel about it?
What's my role? Am I the head coach or am I the special teams coach?
You're in our role. Be from our role. Do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea
I
to be
mean,
more?
look, fourth down is different, right? Now, in a fourth down situation, you like I would tell uh, guys on the punt team if we had a fake on, and obviously punt team that's going to happen on fourth down. Uh, if you can't make your block hold, right, hold because
You're telling him to take the penalty?
take the penalty
Hmm.
because taking the penalty is better than the play being stopped, right? If we take if I'm getting beat and I hold and we get the first down, then all right, they're going to take the penalty. We're going to back it up and we're going to punt.
Got another
We're
shot
going
at
to go
it.
punt the ball, right?
Hmm.
If if uh, if I get beat and the guy makes the tackle, my guy makes the tackle, and we don't get the first down, then
It's already switching over.
yeah, they're taking the possession right there. So in that situation, it's fourth down. I think that's more justifiable if the player stopped uh, than it is, on any other down. Does
So
that make
as
sense?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it absolutely does. Because I mean, if you're gonna get stopped or if it's not gonna work, then you'd rather have another chance of make
Right.
pushing them back 30
And
yards.
I'll take it one step further in terms of like reaching, reaching the ball out for the goal line. That should only be, fourth down. Uh, Really, fourth down is one of the only situations where you really
Really?
want to expose the football. Yeah.
Because there's been many of times that I have complained that my team or player didn't reach for the first down. Like, come on, you're like a foot away. Just push that ball out a little bit and you'll
Well, I
get there.
mean, and
But
it depends on where they're at. On the sideline is okay, but what you don't want to do is reach and have the ball get knocked down, and it was
yeah,
second down, and now you lose a possession.
yeah. So
You
there's
don't want
been
to you don't want to expose the football unless you absolutely have to. It's got to be a what we would term what we call a gotta have it situation.
You don't want to
yeah.
give them a little fake like, here you go. Whoa, nope,
No,
just kidding. You know what I mean?
if we tag gotta have it on the front end or back end of a play, then that tells the players we have to
Yeah,
MVP.
do whatever
we
you
have
got to
to
do.
first down or score at all costs, right?
Yeah. So as your time as a head coach at Central Michigan, I'm curious how well you knew the rule book. The reason I ask is because I think about earlier in the season for Ohio State. They were playing Oregon, driving down the field, last possession, trying to win. Oregon, Dan Lanning, kudos to him, hats off for sure. He sent 12 guys onto the field, knowing that after the penalty, yeah, they gave up 5 yards or whatever that is,
Mm-hmm.
but that automatically makes the clock start running again. Really
Mm-hmm.
bad rule to implement right there, and it was, I think, fixed the next week. But that is a top tier IQ level move is to know I can make Ohio State waste one of their timeouts for only 5 yards. That's a worthwhile investment. So whenever you're a coach, are you just like reading the rule book, trying to find ways to
You
sneak
always
through
are.
like
You
that?
want you want to play. If you're winning, you're trying to play in the gray. But I'm gonna give Mike Vrabel more credit for that than I will Dan Lanning because Mike
Against the
Vrabel did it.
Patriots?
Yeah, he did it the year before or 2 years before against the Patriots. So,
Yeah.
um, and obviously no disrespect to Dan Lanning whatsoever. He's done a phenomenal job. He's a great coach. But yeah, I mean, look, that's part of when you asked me about special teams and those are the type of situations that as a head coach, that's your job. You have to have a you have to have those things scheduled. You have those situations have to be taught and rehearsed, right? And then they have to be reviewed, and then they have to be retaught and reversed. And you know, you have a list of these things, and we would go through them as a team, and we got through the whole list. We'd kind of go right back from the beginning and hit them again. And then during the week. I would always have like on a Thursday meeting, I would always pick a couple things that might have happened, whether they're in the NFL or in college football, and whether they were all situations. Sometimes they were executed well, and you're saying, look at this. This is a great example of what we want to look at. Or there are a lot of times you're coaching off of someone else's mistakes, which is very impactful as well, where you can say, this is what happens when if you're not what should they have done here, right? What you know if you're in it comes down to like things like at the end of the game you have a lead and you have possession of the ball, are you doing a good job of using the clock? Are
Yeah.
it drives me, and I look at that, I look at the game a little bit differently as I watch, college and professional football on Saturday and Sunday. That's my favorite part of the game to watch. The last 4 minutes of the first half, the last 6 minutes of the game, and just to see if people are using the clock to their advantage.
Okay, so then as a coach, head coach, that role, taking me through is it different for every team and the head coach's preference on how many calls are run through them or what calls they make? Because I'll see, like I said, dummy over here, I'll see a play sheet and he'll call in a play or he's talking to someone about a play, right? How many are called by the offense coordinator? How much control does a head coach usually take over? Or is that just
Yeah, I mean,
preference?
look, there's you have all three types, right? You have look at like Denver, right? Sean Payton is Sean Payton has a offensive coordinator in Joe Lombardi, but Sean calls the game. Now,
Yeah.
Joe may be up there suggesting things to him, but he's calling the game. You have the opposite situation in Tampa with Todd Bowles, right? Todd's the defensive. He calls the defenses. Casey Rogers has got the title of defensive coordinator, but there's collaboration during the week. But on game day, Todd's calling the game, and then you have coaches that are not on either side of the ball that are coaching the game and they're listening to what's being called. And then in that situation, that's how I was, with, I would tell the defense, hey, come after him here. Let's
Yeah.
blitz this guy, blitz him. Or I would try to tell the offensive coordinator, hey, you've got 2 downs here, which would tell him third down, we're gonna go for it on 4th down. So don't feel like you have to call a play to get all of it on once. You can, it's communication. And again, a lot of those things are discussed and rehearsed, during the week. You meet on those things. You're not just showing up on game day and willy nilly just going through it, pulling them out of thin air. So
Yeah.
you see all most places I would say there's probably the majority of it's what I just described,
Yeah.
but there's still a lot of coaches that call their own plays or defenses.
So we have some little segments that we occasionally do,
Okay.
and this one is called Start, Bench, Cut.
All right.
I'm going to give you 3 kickers. You have to start one, bench one, and cut one.
All right.
Hopefully, I'm picking kickers that are
All right.
actually comparable to each other.
Okay.
So 1, Justin Tucker.
Okay.
2, Steven Gostkowski. 3, Adam Vinatieri.
Oh, geez. Why would you pick? I'd start Vinatieri.
Really? All-time
Yeah.
leading scorer for the Colts? That's who
Yep.
you're going with?
Yep.
Okay. That's surprising over Justin Tucker.
Well, Caleb, you just said something that would make me think it's not very surprising.
What? Oh, all-time
All
leading.
time. You just gave him his accolades, and then you said, "Why would you have him start?"
He
That's
also
crazy.
played until he was like 50, so he
Yeah.
had a lot of time to rack up
I
points.
mean,
Yeah, but
isn't that a good thing?
He made some amazingly clutch kicks in some very, very difficult situations, right? I mean, some super, playoff winning kicks. So that's why I go with Vinatieri. Man, golly, here's the hard part. You're putting me on the spot, Caleb, because I know these guys personally.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I worked out Gostowski. I went to work him out at Memphis. I've spent a lot of time. I never had Justin but I've spent a lot of time around him. Randy Brown, who coaches him, is a good friend of mine. So, you know what? You're not paying me enough. I'm going to respect you answer that.
Okay. Well, we at
That's
least
fair.
know
That's
that
fair.
Vinatieri is up
I was
top.
hoping
but-
Zane Gonzalez was going to be in there because that'd be my bench. I would bench.
Yeah.
Oh,
That was a good segment. Good way to evade the question, though. I applaud you for that, John.
the more people we talk to, the more I get a feel for how good they are at navigating questions and answers and things and getting it to the place that they want it to be.
Yeah.
More, you know what I mean? It's been fun to see how good people is a
you
skill.
know what? I think that comes from dealing, having to I
Press
don't want to
conferences?
deal with the media, but working, having worked with the media both in the NFL and then especially as a head coach, You know, when you're an assistant in the NFL or a coordinator in the NFL, it's intermittent, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, and it kind of depends on where you are. Like that was, I was really young. I was a young coach, or especially by NFL standards, when I went to Green Bay, and I had come from Jacksonville. I'd only been a coordinator in Jacksonville for one season. That was my first coordinator position, and you know the media attention, the media market in Jacksonville, Florida, is much different than it is in Green Bay, and nothing really. I was I wasn't prepared for it. You know,
Mm.
I didn't realize that there'd be these media sections and that they would all want to come and talk to me, and you know I made mistakes early on, and so. I kind of learned, I guess I learned through that experience that I could always kind of, you know, if there was a message that I wanted to deliver my team, I was always talking to my team,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially as a head coach. I would kind of talk over their head to what I wanted my team to hear. At least I tried to.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, it seems like every time I watch a media interview, sometimes, man, those media members, they're brave because you can
Yeah,
tell they don't want to answer a question. They don't want a question
sure,
asked, but it's their job to then ask that
sure.
question. And so I'm
And
sitting here like, ooh, no, don't ask it. But at the
I
same time, I
was,
want to hear what he says.
yeah, I always tried to be, I tried to work with those guys as best as I could. You know, I didn't, you know, you know, it's easy to go in there after a win. You know, it's not so much fun after, you know, a loss, especially a game that, you know, maybe it was a game where you were expected to, you know, truly expected to win. But at the same time, it's like you, it's part of your job.
Yeah.
It's a very important part of your job description. And, you know, you got to do it. And I think that, you know, you know, I just try to be respectful. And if there's, you know, if I didn't like the content or tone of a question, I would just try to work around it or just you know,
Yeah.
politely decline to answer it. Like kind of like what I did with Caleb just
Yeah,
now.
exactly. That makes
Seals
sense.
paid off.
Caleb's a little, you know, there was a little malice in that question,
Yeah.
right?
Well, this next one, hopefully, you don't have the same type of response. With your experiences, you kind of went back and forth with a lot of different places. Like you were at the Saints 2 different times, Jaguars 2 different times, the Lions 2 different times too. Is that
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah. And you don't have to give any specific reasonings on this, but what's the typical offseason like as a coordinator? Because I see like the Lions right now, they're probably going to lose their offense and defensive coordinators to other teams' head coach positions. Rightfully so. They've done an exceptional job with the Lions. But are you just getting offers from these other teams and you're like, well, I make more money if I go coach the Saints or
Well, no,
whoever?
it's not quite like usually. Typically, you're out of the job or you're looking, you know,
Oh,
and
is it really?
yeah, I mean, you know,
Okay.
there's a lot of sometimes it's but if you're an NFL coach, you're under contract, and they're not going to let you just up and leave somewhere. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes coaches, if they're not happy with the numbers on their salaries, they'll let their contract expire, which is, you know, it's a risk. But some
Yeah.
guys are willing to do that. I never felt comfortable doing that because I wanted to have the security because I have a family and that's my first and most important responsibility. And you know, uh, number one, I never coached for the money. The money's for your family. But you know, if you're coaching in the National Football League, you're pretty well compensated. And I understand and completely respect the fact that guys want to do. You know, that people want more, but you know, I think the ability to go back and forth really is a lot on how you treat people. You know, your professional integrity is the most important, uh, most important thing that you have as a coach. You know, so
Yeah.
the relationships with you have that you have in the building, and I think you could take this to any type of business, right? I mean, sometimes things don't work out. You know, people go in different directions for you know a lot of different reasons, but you know, you don't need to burn bridges on your way out,
Yeah.
because when you burn a bridge, you can never cross back over it. That's why they say that. So, maintain those relationships. If, mend those fences if you felt you were hurt, or, call that person, hash it out. But, there's no reason to carry animosity. I think, one of my favorite quotes is from Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela said that resentment is like drinking poison and expecting it to kill your enemies. So when you think about that, you know, uh, you're carrying all that stuff, all that baggage around. The only person that's really hurting is you, because whoever did it to you, they're no longer thinking about it. So you just let it go and keep going. But you're whatever vocation you are in, man, you just work hard, try to be the very best version of yourself that you can be. Be honest with people, and you know, if you do that and you're consistent with that, I think you'll find the doors open for you. And once uh, that door can open. Just because it was opened and then shut, it doesn't mean that it can't reopen again. I'm living that. I worked for three different There's three franchises that you mentioned that I had two different stints of.
Yeah.
So
So speaking of those stints, of all the places that you coached at, either home or away, because you had, was it 20, 30 years coaching experience? So,
yes, probably closer to 40 by now.
oh,
Yeah.
geez. Okay, yeah. So you've had more coaching experience than Chase and I have been alive. So yeah, you've been around the
Make me
block once
feel
or
old.
twice. Yeah, I'm
Jeez,
sorry.
Caleb,
Sorry.
there's another malice question. I mean, just
I'm
the
sorry.
questions, man.
No, yeah, you're only
Uh,
as old. You're only as old as you feel. Honestly,
yeah, there you go.
I
Like that
Well,
mindset.
that's not good because I feel like I'm 45. So
So of all these places that you played at, is there just one stadium or fan base that stands above the rest as that's a hard place to go and win a game? Or
I love my Saints fans in New Orleans.
Saints?
Yeah, I think that dome, because it's an older, it's the architecture of the Superdome is old school, right? So the only place where the sounds reverberated like that was in Minnesota. What was the Vikings' old stadium?
Mm,
Oh gosh, I forget the name, but those were very similar structures. The dome gets really, really loud. I mean, even the PA announcer, you can barely understand what the guy's saying when you're on the field. Maybe I was never in the stand, so I don't know, but on the field, it's just the sound reverberates. It's a very, very loud place. When Steve Gleason, who's over this shoulder right here, when he
yeah.
blocked that punt, and when we reopened the Superdome, that was the loudest I've ever been anywhere, ever heard. And it felt like it lasted 5 whole minutes. It was probably more
wow.
like 40 seconds, but it was pretty incredible. Um, you know, Lambeau's Lambeau's a great place. Special place.
You got that Favre jersey behind you too.
Yep,
I'm
yep.
sure that was a special time
He
to be
sure
at the
was.
Packers.
Gosh, when 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 they were in Oakland, because I haven't been in the Raiders' new stadium, that was a cool place to go and play. And in the
Yeah.
black hole, and those that's a great fan base. And I you know can't uh, can't forget the Seahawks. If you're playing in Seattle, you better get up early. You better jump on them early, because if you let that place get going, that's a
Oh
hard
yeah.
place to go into and try and win from coming from behind.
Is that Lumen Field? Is
Yes,
that yeah.
yeah. That place was engineered to be loud, and the fans do their part in making it that way. Yeah.
So flip side of that, then, what is the quietest stadium / fan base that you've consistently? I mean, you've been around the league over several years. So obviously, 1 year you might have a team that's 2 and
Um,
14. So that doesn't count. But
right,
just as a
probably
general.
Probably Kent State on a nice Wednesday night during
There you
Maction.
go. Yeah.
You know when hopefully it's parents' night for the band.
There you
So
go.
that the attendance might end up being 500 people. Yeah,
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, to be fair, everyone in Ohio is an Ohio State fan. So are there really even Kent State fans?
That's
It's
true. We have talked about this many times, John. Everyone
well,
agrees that
look.
everyone in
Here's
Ohio is an Ohio State fan. So
but here's the thing. Here's the great thing about the state of Ohio, and it's a lot like my home state of Michigan. There's a lot of college football in Ohio. I
yeah,
mean, you don't just have Ohio State. You got Ohio University, who's had a lot of success. You got Bowling Green. You got Toledo, who's always good, right?
Miami of
Um,
Ohio.
Miami of Ohio, who's got a tremendous tradition. Kent State, Akron. Gosh, there's like 7 Division 1. There's 7 FBS schools in the state of Ohio. 8 if you got University of Cincinnati is
Yeah, and
another
Xavier,
excellent
but they don't
program.
have a football team.
Yeah, but
So,
I'm talking just FBS schools. So that's you know Ohio State, Ohio qualifies as a football state in my book. How I judge things, and
yeah.
the state of Michigan, you got Michigan, Michigan State, you have Central, Western, and Eastern Michigan that are all FBS. So it's
So tell us about the recruiting trail.
mhm.
Or as a head coach, I'm sure you did it pretty frequently. Just kind of hitting the road
Well,
and
honestly, as a head coach, you're on the road the least of anybody because
really.
the
mm,
NCAA rules prohibit you. You're only allowed
Mm,
one off-campus contact per prospect with
really,
in college football. Yes, at least it was that way. I'm pretty sure that hasn't
not
changed.
coordinators though, just the head
Just
coach.
the head coach.
Okay, so
All
coordinators
the
kind of
assistants are allowed one a week. During
mm,
those quote contact periods, which are the days or the segments on the calendar that the NCAA allows for everybody
yeah,
to be out recruiting because you know, they're in the NCAA rule book for recruiting. There's contact periods where you can have off campus contact with the player. There's what's called a quiet period where coaches cannot be off campus, but you can meet with prospects on your campus or within like I think 5 mile radius.
mm,
And then what they call a dead period where there's no on campus or off campus contact whatsoever. So the rules are
okay,
pretty specific, but the head coaches are the most limited. So, you want to save that visit for when it's going to be the most
most
impactful.
impactful. So,
That's
are you essentially talking about with the assistants? Let's just say you as a head coach, or you as an assistant at the time. How does the interaction work? Is it like the head coach is saying, "Okay, these are the prospects I want to really focus on," and then he goes to the assistants and says, "I want you to really be in contact here." Until then, he goes and
well,
makes
they're
a
recruiting.
contact there.
It depends on how you structure your recruiting, but most places. The coaches have an area, a
Mm,
geographic area. And once they cover their geographic area and we have evaluations, then you'll do your area recruiting, then your position specific recruiting. So once that list gets pared down, then if I'm the running back coach, then I'm going to go visit the running backs in my
mm,
area. And then, the final phase is when the head coach goes out and now you're not going to there aren't enough days where you're going to see you're really going to the top prospects, the guys that you've targeted that you really want. The head coach is coming in. He's really trying to close the deal by
but
the time.
the head coach can call and be in
Oh yeah,
contact, just
yes,
not visit,
yes,
right? So that
yes. It's
visit
not
is where the big.
face to
Okay.
face off camera. Yeah, I would try to, you're allowed one phone call a week. So
It's like a prison.
we would schedule that. That's the job. That's why you hire a recruiting coordinator and we would organize that and say, okay,
Yeah.
coach, this
Maximize
week,
how many
yeah,
contacts you can make. Yeah.
this week you need to call these guys, or sometimes I would tell the assistants, hey, I'm calling Chase, this week, you call
Hear
him.
that, Caleb? I'm getting recruited. That's right. I'm getting
I
recruited.
think I've already burned my bridge to Coach Bono here.
No, you're good.
So then, interesting on that. The recruiting process, it's always so interesting because it feels like a coach can come in and make an immediate impact play style wise. Do you feel like it takes a while for a coach that comes into a program to build the program the way he wants it with the way recruiting is? It's not, you
Not in
can't
this day and
trade.
age. Not in
Well,
this
that's
day.
true. That's true.
You
But
know,
maybe let's go back to when you were
well,
coaching
when I
more.
got the head job at Central Michigan, like you know, it's a lot different than it is now. I mean, you had to build it through recruiting. You know, you did have transfers, but transfers weren't immediately eligible. They had to sit out of the year. And the other thing that changed now in college football, when a head coach takes over a program, of the 85 scholarship players, you don't have to keep them all on scholarships. So if I have, you know, if you have a player that you just, after evaluating him in the spring, you just don't think he's good enough, you know, that player can stay enrolled at that institution so he doesn't lose his scholarship, but essentially you're cutting him from the team, right? And then you could take that scholarship and offer it to somebody else. But, you know, now with the transfer portal, the way things are, I mean, it's really, I think you can build your roster up very, very quickly. I mean, look at
Yeah.
Indiana. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they brought almost I forget how many. They had a bunch of transfers. They brought a bunch of kids with them from, you know, Signetti done a phenomenal job. Brought a bunch of those kids from James Madison, and they end up starting. So
Yeah. Them
when
and even Colorado. I mean, they went from like
right,
a 2-11 season to all of a sudden, not that they had an amazing first season, but
right,
clearly a big jump. You know what I
sure.
mean?
So you know, those things weren't, you know, that wasn't the case when, you know, just 5 years ago, you know,
Yeah.
before all of this took place.
Nice. That's cool. It's really interesting.
So, do you have an opinion on NIL?
I think
Is it good
it's
or bad?
I think it's good, but I think we need to find a way to reel it in. You know, I think that it's you know, I don't know what the answer is to that. I think there's a lot of, you know, I think there should be a clearinghouse where, you know, where we just make everything transparent. So you know, Ohio State's offered Caleb this much money, you know,
$5.
you know, Chase, so that it's out there, because right now it's kind of like, yeah,
Yeah, an undisclosed amount.
it's an undisclosed amount, and some of those amounts are being grossly like inflated,
Yeah.
and so coaches are kind of communicating with another. Hey, did you offer him? You know, how much did you guys offer him? Blah, blah. He's saying you offered him $1 million. No, we didn't offer him that. So it's, you know, hey, it's a little bit out of control, but you know, there's no sense complaining about it. I tell everybody that I talk to, it's like it's not going away. Just like, you know,
Yeah.
let's just figure out a way to make more sense where it doesn't feel like, you know, I mean, what's going on right now? 10 years ago, they'd be shutting programs down, right? It'd be like
Exactly.
you'd be getting the NCAA death penalty. Everybody would be.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how much Ohio State paid, and the rumor is 20 million, but it seems to have paid off. You know, they won the national
Won the
championship.
Well, it
national-
started off as 20 million, but then they said that Ohio State paid 20 million, which was apparently so above everyone else. Come to find out, there's a lot of teams that paid 20 million for their
Oh, really?
squads. Oh yeah, I was just coming out recently that there were a lot of teams that paid big money for their teams and did not perform like Ohio State. So
I think that they should eliminate scholarships and just implement a salary cap. You know,
that's a new one we haven't heard yet.
Yeah.
I mean,
Coach Bono coming in.
to me, where look, there's only so much money that you can generate, right? So
Yeah.
the money that used to be that the boosters used to donate to the athletic department, right? Now that's going to collectives. So, you know, and I'm all for. I'm definitely not against the players, you know, getting paid and stuff. But I think at some point you got to ask yourself, like, what's the value of the scholarship? It's probably, you know,
Yeah, it doesn't mean as much.
on one hand, it's the most valuable thing because it's that you're giving them an education. On the other hand, they're making so much money, that education probably would be a little bit more meaningful to them if they had to pay for it themselves. So that'd probably be the only thing that I would implement a salary cap, and I would take into consideration what the cost of attendance is at each given institution. So it wouldn't be like a unilaterally across the board. If you're if you're at Stanford or Notre Dame, which is private institutions where, you know, yeah, you got to pay your own tuition. Um, that might take into account. We'd want to compensate for that
Sure.
versus somebody that's paying in-state tuition at a state school. So
Yeah.
I
Kent
think,
State.
yeah,
Kent
Kent
State.
State, Akron.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we could keep going with this conversation for a long time, so we really appreciate you coming on. We'll ask one more, and then we'll let you go. The question is, how does someone get
Whoa.
into?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me what my favorite color was.
Oh yeah, close. How does someone get into special teams coordinator? Like you can imagine other people, they were a wide receiver, they go to wide receiver coach, offense coordinator, kind of go up that route or something. But special teams is kind of a unicorn in the sense of it's all encompassing. It's not a specific position that you move up
I
to.
think something that, that's an interesting question. I think it's for everybody. It's just individual, just different.
Nice, Caleb.
I mean, I think a lot of times, for me, it was an opportunity. I was fortunate early in my career that I was teamed up with a guy that, in my second year as a graduate assistant at the University of Maine, I was fortunate enough that a guy by the name of John Baxter, came into my life, and I believe that, everybody comes into and out of your life. It's either for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, right? And so with Bax, that's been a lifetime relationship. And, as a very young coach, he was only a year or so older than I am. I played college football, then became a GA. Bax was more of a student assistant, and he had already been a graduate assistant twice when he was hired at University of Maine for his first full-time job. And Bax was a young authority on special teams at a time in football where very, very, very few people were really specializing in that area. And I'm looking at him going, gosh, in a year, I'm going to be not going to be a GA anymore. I'm going to be in the same situation. I'm going to be looking for a first full-time job. This guy has moved the needle forward for himself as a coach by specializing in this. And so I learned as much as I could. And a year later, he ends up going to back to University of Arizona to be the full-time special teams coordinator with Dick Tomey. Kirk Ferentz gets the University of Maine head coaching job and elevates me from wide receiver graduate assistant to full-time wide receiver coach and special teams coordinator, and that's where it started off. And then from there it's kind of like do you like it and are you good at it? And when you're good at something, people try to tend to keep you in that role. And so
Yeah.
That's how it happened for me. Everybody's different.
Any suggestions you would make to someone
Caleb's trying to become a coach here, and
Yeah.
he's wondering
I
how to do it.
would, look, I would just say, I would tell any coach, any young coach that's just starting off, that just to try to be in a situation where you're around good people and you have an opportunity to learn and understand that, you have to, like anything else, coaching is a meritocracy, football is a meritocracy. Understand that in the beginning, the duties that you get, they may not seem important. They might be menial, but everything's important, and you do, put as much attention to detail and work as you possibly can with the little things. And once you prove that you can master those things, then people are going to give you more. And I think that that's really true in any vocation and just in life in general. Try to stay, it's okay to keep an eye on the prize, but make sure your focus is where you're at right now and serving the people that you work with and work for.
Love it. Put family first, people second, service third. something like that.
Yeah.
Well,
Nailed it, Caleb. Nailed it.
Yeah, I just put it in a nutshell for you, John. You're welcome. Well, thanks so much for coming on our podcast. This has been really insightful for Chase and I, and for our listeners. I know it will. So it's been a blast diving into your knowledge and
Yeah,
expertise on.
I had a great time. It's a pleasure to meet you guys. And hey, let's do it again.
Let's do it. See, we didn't even ask you how you got started. I was like, oh man, we're coming close to time. We probably spend a whole another episode on just your experience on it.
Coaching.
Yeah, the whole thing. So we'll have to have you on again to talk
Well,
about
I can tell
where you
you
went.
that it was never, for me personally, it was once I made the decision, which was about my sophomore year in college, because I looked around, I'm like, I'm a walk on at Central. These guys are, I'm probably not going to have a career as a player in the National Football League, but I really want to stay involved with this game. And I said the best way for me to do that is to be a coach. And it's really the only job it's not a job. It's the only thing I ever really wanted to do. And, man, I've been very fortunate. I love it. It's when you can do something that you love, it's not work.
Yeah. Well, passion. That's what it's all about. All of our listeners, they're passionate about sports. That's why they listen. So thank you so much to our listeners. Don't forget to follow us and leave us a review. We're on every social platform because TikTok's back.
TikTok's back. It's back. It was gone for 2 days and it's back.
Yep. Remember, never stop loving sports, and catch us next time on The Yips.